All right, so I was watching a podcast the other day, and it was pretty thought provoking. I think the podcast is called Modern Wisdom. It's Chris Williamson's podcast. You probably see him around on YouTube. He pops up in a lot of places. But on this podcast, Chris was talking to his guest who has been studying birth rate decline. Okay, and they go way in depth. If you're interested, if you want to watch that podcast, I'm gonna leave a link in the description if you're interested. But what I really want to talk about in this video is what I want to do is kind of give you my perspective as to why this birth rate is declining. So to do this, I'm going to introduce to you the concept of size, okay? And I'm referring to the size of humanity. So to start small, let's start with just a small tribe of 20 people, okay? And this is all of humanity. There's only 20 people on the planet, and they're all in one tribe. And what is this tribe going to do? Well, they're probably going to work together, okay? And they're probably going to be pretty damn good at working together because there isn't some labor pool of 8 billion people who they can take from and replace somebody with, right? So if you're the blacksmith in the tribe, you are pivotal, right? If you're the farmer, you are pivotal to that tribe. And essentially what this means is that if there's only 20 people in total, every single person is probably going to have a unique skill. Every single person is going to provide unique value to that tribe. And what this means is that everyone is going to value everybody else. Everyone is going to cooperate with everybody else. Everyone's going to have the capacity to feel empathy for everybody else, right? Everyone's going to care for everybody else because everyone's dependent on each other, right? And not only are they dependent on each other, but they are well aware of it, okay? So they're going to have close relationships, right? They're going to be deeply connected to each other. So let's get a little bigger though. Let's go from 20 people to 150 people. And there's a reason I picked 150. So there's this concept of Dunbar's number. Now, what Dunbar's number is an estimate of the limit of the number of people that a person can maintain meaningful relationships with. So, in other words, let's say you meet 10,000 people. There's just no way to maintain relationships with 10,000 people. You would have to, what would you have to do? You'd have to text 10,000 people a day. You'd have to talk to 5,000 of them, text 5,000 of them. I don't know, email another couple. Like, there's just no way to maintain a relationship with that many people. And what Dunbar's number is it is an estimate, again, on the number of people that we can maintain meaningful relationships with. And that estimate is 150. Now, me personally, I might get 50 if I'm lucky. But some people might be able to manage 150. But that's not the point. So let's go now from 150 to 8 billion. Okay? Now we're in the real world. When you jump from 150 to 8 billion, something very interesting happens. Okay? And it's kind of intuitive if you think about it. But what happens is you obviously lose the ability to even fathom that many people. You lose the ability to care for that many people, right? Imagine if every person that died sent an obituary to your phone and you had to read it and you had to send your condolences. Like, it's just not fucking possible, right? There's just too many people. And this, again, creates an interesting phenomenon because what happens is we become less aware of our dependence on each other, okay? And some of you, many people perhaps, may believe that they are independent, or maybe they're only dependent on a small group of people. Maybe they're only dependent on a few family, friends, coworkers, etc. But that's not actually reality, okay? In reality, the world is globalized, okay? And what that means is that the very smartphone that I'm using to record this video on required at least 5 million people to create, right? You have to account for all the people responsible for pulling the raw materials out of the earth and the people that built the tools that pulled those raw materials out of the earth. And then you have to account for everyone that designed the phone and everyone that manufactured the phone and everyone that transported all of the parts of that phone to where they needed to be, when they needed to be there, ultimately into my hand, right? And then you have to account for all the people that provide the electricity that I charge my phone with, right? It becomes very easy to see how we are very dependent on many more people than just our small tribe, right? But what happens when we scale from 150 people to 8 billion is that the understanding of that dependence doesn't scale with the actual dependence, right? So, in other words, we're not very aware that we're dependent on people. We might even think we're independent. Some of us might think we don't need anybody. That's a very rare person, a person who can go on a homestead and live alone. And even then, that person was dependent on wisdom that was passed down to them, right? If you're on a homestead living alone, somebody taught you how to farm. Somebody raised you as an infant into adulthood so that you could take care of yourself. And the skills they passed down to you were passed down from their ancestors and so on and so forth, right? So the bottom line is there's no independent person on this planet. We're all dependent on each other. But again, as you scale from 150 to 8 billion people, the understanding of that dependence does not scale with the actual dependence. So now to kind of flip this concept over to the birth rate. Why is the birth rate declining? Well, the birth rate, I think, is declining because nature is kind of giving us a way out. Nature is telling us that if we don't become aware of our dependence on each other, then what's going to happen is we're going to destroy each other, right? And that's kind of where all this war comes from, right? We've been at war with each other for millennia, and that's because humanity has been larger than 150 people for millennia, right? We just simply can't contain all of those people in our umbrella of empathy. And what I think is happening is that the reason the birth rate is declining is because nature is calling on us to evolve, okay? And this is a big calling, okay? It's calling on us to evolve, to expand that umbrella of empathy to the entire species, lest we continue these vicious cycles of mutually assured destruction, right? Nature is forcing us to recognize the mutually assured destruction inherent to the competitive mindsets that crop up when you move from 150 to 8 billion people. In other words, again, this calling it's a big calling, but it is a necessary calling to take humanity to this next level. And what I'm asking you to do, first I'll start with what I'm not asking you to do is to try to maintain a relationship with 8 billion people. Instead, what I'm asking you to do is to try to gain an awareness and an empathy for people. And to try to look deeper at your behaviors, your everyday actions, and try to become aware of how they might affect other people, okay? Positively or negatively, because the truth is if you find a way that you're positively affecting people, that is fuel for your own motivation. It's fuel for your psyche, right? It feels good to help people. But at the same time, if we're not aware of how we're hurting other people, then the birth rate, the nature might throw declining birth rates at us in order to halt the mutually assured destruction, to get us to wake up and get us to evolve, okay? So that's just a perspective I wanted to give you here. I think nature is calling on us. It is giving us what we need to evolve. But in order to do that, frankly, we're going to have to leave behind the old economic structures that are dependent on infinite growth, okay? Infinite population growth. So give that a little thought, okay? Answer this calling, because it contains a capacity for beauty that you couldn't have fathomed, okay? Humanity needs to step up into divinity in order to answer this calling. We have to understand, we have to become more aware of how our actions affect ourselves through others. We have to become aware of how slave labor helped make this smartphone I'm recording this video on, right? And with that awareness, one day, the person that makes a smartphone might love their job so much, who is currently a slave perhaps, working wage labor or slave wage labor, might one day enjoy that job and be motivated to bring innovation that we couldn't have imagined, right? When you pay somebody well, they get pretty good at innovating. But when you don't pay them well, when you pay them slave wage labor, it's not going to do much good, okay, in the long term. So again, answer this calling. Expand your umbrella of empathy, and try to become aware of the indirect ways in which you may harm people. Okay, so thanks for watching.